Hey there, Internet. Thanks for joining us tonight on this course for nowhere. I'm your stalwart host, the Media Nomad, and with me tonight we have returning special guest, DJ Agron.
That is not my name at all.
Not even close?
No. No, it's DJ Armah.
DJ Armah. Alright, I'll remember it eventually. I forgot it last time.
It's okay. And it was actually Armah Core, but some people just can't seem to word that out right.
Anyway, no Ivy tonight. It's just us dudes.
Two dudes.
Two dudes. Just two dudes getting together on a Friday night.
Two dudes, one cup.
So anyway, yeah, so just us tonight, we decided to go with doing a retrospective of the Metroid franchise.
Mm-hmm. In particular, I'm going to be focusing on Super Metroid, and it seems like your expertise is Metroid Prime. Is that correct?
Well, I played all of them. I haven't played them to the extent that you've played Super Metroid, but
Too much.
I've played through every game in the franchise except for two at least twice.
Two, fantastic game.
Yeah.
And you said that they came out with they didn't come out with, but a fan made an updated version of 2.
Right. Now before we dive too much into that, you said you wanted some opinions on the Switch.
Uh-huh. Yes, please.
So what did you want to know about it?
I wanted to know about how the console seems to fare on a standalone because I've heard a couple of people say that it seems more of a party console.
Well, right now, I've only ever had it just for solo stuff because it's only got 4 physical games out right now. And one of those is Zelda. And that's solo all the way through. And that's been absolutely fine. I've had a blast with it. It's a wonderful game. Completely deserving of all the 10 out of 10 it's getting across the board.
Mm-hmm. What are the other 3 games that came out?
They were like 1-2 Switch, which is like their equivalent of like the Wii Sports or the Nintendo Land. It's basically up to pack. It's like a party title that the general consensus is that it should have been a pack-in as like a tech demo to kind of help out the price, or not help out the price, but help out the sales a little bit. But they're selling it as a standalone for the full. I think it's full retail for that. And yeah, there's that. So we have Zelda. We had 1-2 Switch. There's a new Bomberman out for that.
Oh, I love the old Bomberman games.
There's a new Bomberman out, and then there's I think Just Dance.
That's a great game too. I can't even lie. I definitely got that on the Xbox Connect.
You know what was awesome, and it always gets shat on, is the Just Dance mini games they put into the Star Wars Connect, because those were amazing.
Were they?
They were. Well, basically, they were all Star Wars covers of pop songs.
Wasn't there a Han Solo one?
There was. Instead of I'm Solo, it was Han Solo, and it was spectacular, and all the fanboys just collectively screamed in rage, and here I am just going, oh, this sounds like fun. This is so dopey, I can't hate it. I can't hate you, Star Wars Connect.
It's like trying to hate on Jar Jar Binks.
Right, like it's a common thing you're going to see me say on the podcast. It's hard for me to actually hate something that is just too dopey.
That's how I feel about Beautiful Katamari, but what's not to love about that game?
Everything's to love about Beautiful Katamari. It makes me want to do drugs. I don't do drugs. It makes me want to start doing drugs.
I've definitely played that game on drugs.
Like all of the parents who are like marijuana is the gateway drug. No, Katamari is the gateway drug.
That sounds about right to me.
So anyway, I've had the Switch for I guess exactly a week now. It's the only issue I've had with it is I took it over to a friend's house and we did the thing where we split the two controllers, the Joy-Cons apart, and mine had trouble syncing. My left one had trouble syncing, and we found out later on that that controller needs direct line of sight to the console. We had put it behind her TV, and that's why we were having interference.
Oh, okay.
But I've looked into it, and once I moved it around and it was back in line of sight, we had no more problems.
Okay, well then that's not too bad. Although I do miss the good old-fashioned Nintendo GameCube wireless controllers, because I swear those things you could take in the bathroom and still play with.
Oh my god, like the GameCube controller. Can we talk for a second about how the GameCube controller is the most perfect controller ever devised by man?
No, because I think it's a Super Nintendo controller, but hey, go right on ahead.
Alright, so here's I'm going to tell you why you're objectively wrong.
Okay.
First off, the GameCube controller is super ergonomic. Like it's apart from my custom, or not custom, but like limited edition Batman Xbox 360 controller, it's the most comfortable thing I've ever held as far as controllers go. I love the fact that all the buttons are different shapes, so you can very easily just feel that out whenever you're playing. You don't actually have to memorize like button order. The shoulder buttons were actually pressure sensitive, so you would get a different effect by just like tapping them and holding them as opposed to depressing them all the way. And
I do remember that.
it was the first controller ever to do that, and also had built-in rumble, which I think was also the very first controller to have built-in rumble. And then the way
Was it, or was it the DualShock 2 on the PlayStation 4? PS2.
I'm not sure. That's why I said I'm a bit iffy on that. I know at the time for me it was mind blowing because I was 10 and I'd heard of rumble packs on the N64, but I'd never gotten to play with them much. But then I found out that the GameCube was just having rumble packs inside of it. Like it's not even extra.
You had to get extended rumble packs for those old controllers.
You don't even need to get like an extra thing. It's just inside it.
Yep. But even on top of that, who's to say that rumble's really necessary? Does it make the game feel more in depth?
See, I'm a very kinesthetic person, so rumble always makes things better for me.
Okay, I can respect that.
I actually have a rumble pack for my Game Boy Color.
Oh wow! I didn't know that they even made those.
Essentially, what it is it's a modified speaker. It plugs into your headphone jack, and it goes by what sound is coming through. And when the sound gets more intense, it increases the rumble. Or like if it has sudden sharp sounds, it'll have like a sharper spike as opposed to like a softer ambient music. It won't do anything. But for the louder sound effects that go off, it will create a rumble.
And then it worked as a passive, right? You could still hear noise.
Yeah, and it was also acted as its own speaker because it had a nice speaker built into it. And I've started just keeping that thing on my Game Boy Color because the thing still runs pretty well. I got that thing in like 1998. I'm going to say I picked up that Game Boy Color maybe 1998 and 1999 at the latest. And everything about it still runs really well except for the speaker. The speaker's kind of shot.
Well, what are you going to do? Was that the first Game Boy that you ever bought?
It was. I got that with Pokemon Red. And for the longest time, that Game Boy Color was essentially the Pokemon and Zelda machine.
Hey, I can't blame you. That was about what my Game Boys were, too. I remember my first one wasn't even a color. It was a pocket, which was the small version of the original Game Boy.
Which is the brick.
It was the size of a Game Boy Color, essentially. Just a little bit thinner, and it only did black and white.
Right.
But that was a lot of fun to use, and then I remember going on to the Game Boy Advanced, and I fell in love with that, because that was just what you were talking about ergonomically sat in my hand much better, and that was my, Pokemon Emerald machine.
Right. Actually, I kind of inherited a Game Boy Advance SP a little bit later on, and I love the SP. It's not quite as ergonomic as the original GBA, but it makes up for it. The fact that you can fold it up, and that's super cool, and it has the backlit screen. So those two features, make up for it.
The biggest thing for me growing up, because riding in the back of the car trying to play by lamplight coming down from streetlights was just the worst.
I've done that too. Oh my god. I know for me, I think I actually I'm not sure whether I got more use out of my Game Boy Color or my Nintendo DS. Because the Color I had as a kid, I played it a lot, but also my parents were really strict about how much time I actually got to spend gaming.
Oh.
But by the time I got the DS my freshman year of high school, and it was pretty much a constant with me, because that was the same year my mom and stepdad got divorced. I had to do a move, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And so it was really nice that I could just have a thing in my pocket that I could just take out and just have and play. So I got way more use out of my DS than anything else. And then eventually I went to college, and I almost always had that thing on me in college because I may not have had time to go home and do a full session. But I almost always had, if I had 15 minutes on campus, I could always just take that out, load up some Advance Wars, load up some Phantom Hourglass, or since we're going to bring it back around to Metroid, pick out some Metroid Hunters. Fusion was good too. Fusion on the GBA was actually my first Metroid game.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really good intro because, you had the cliff hanging, so you could hang off of the side of things, which was really nice. Then you had that extended. No, I'm thinking of Metroid Zero Mission. I'm sorry.
Right.
Metroid Fusion was cool because it had a fear factor to it that other Metroid games didn't really bring to me.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like Fusion is. I know that I've played them all, I feel like Fusion is actually not a great entry to the series because
No.
Fusion is unique in that it breaks a lot of the series conventions. It's a little bit more linear. It's a lot more story driven, and uh, it's more linear. It's more story driven, and it story wise it piggybacks a lot off of what Super Metroid did. So I feel like
Yes, it
that's
does.
gameplay
By the way,
wise.
your microphone sounds like it's cutting in and out a little bit on my end. Are you able to hear yourself?
Yeah, I'm coming through just fine, and I'm hitting the waveforms.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. So I feel
Sorry
like
about that.
no, it's all right. Yeah, I feel like Fusion is probably a bad place to jump in. I jumped in at Fusion because that was what was just out. Because the Super Metroid came out in 1994. Was that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
And
I
then
was
Fusion didn't come out until almost a full decade later, from what I understand.
right. So I was 4 years old when the original Super Metroid came out. So I way missed the boat on that. And so by the time the stars aligned, they put out a new Metroid, and I had a console to play it on. I had a GBA. By that point, Fusion was the only game in town because it's not like you could go out and get an emulator or a virtual console. If you wanted to play Super Metroid, you'd have to go out, you'd have to find a working Super Nintendo and a working copy of Super Metroid and get that physically hooked up for it to work.
Not to mention, at the time, those consoles were so rather expensive, and the Super Metroid, being such a great game as it was also expensive also.
Lots of pattern with first-party Nintendo games is that they never seem to make quite enough of them, and the people who have them never want to let them go because, as a Nintendo fanboy, I guess almost zealot myself, I'm not letting go of my Zelda or my Metroid games. I love those games, and
Mm-hmm.
so their prices almost never go down aftermarket. Like even now, you go out and look at Pokemon games, you're never going to be able to buy a used Pokemon game for under $30.
No, which is absolutely ludicrous considering how many copies I think I have sitting around in coffee table shelves and just random places.
If you do like direct without like eBay or selling like pick them up at a GameStop or an exchange, if you can find someone like directly one to one, they'll probably get you something cheap. You can probably get it for 15 or 20, however much they're willing to let it go for.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, but if you want to pick one up at like a brick and mortar store or even on Amazon, it's going to run you about 30-40 bucks.
Absolutely. And I remember being at the Exchange, which is a video game place near me, and somebody was turning in a bunch of their old Pokemon games, and they got cash wise $110 alone for 6 copies of games. And that's pretty considerable when you think about the fact that they're going to turn around and resell them for 30. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. Yeah, because I love
But
my Nintendo. It fosters a certain level of loyalty, so we don't want to let go of our franchises.
no, and not to mention when it comes down to gameplay and features, Nintendo was pretty groundbreaking for what they were doing back then.
Yeah, because I know we're going to bounce around a bit. Super Metroid was phenomenal when it came out, and I actually did not play Super Metroid until college. And
Mm.
so I was playing it well over, probably about 15 years after it was, because I would have played it, would have been about 2011. So that would have been a solid, yeah, it would have been a solid 15 years, 15, 16 years
When you
between.
played it, when you played it, did you run it as if you were playing it with no help? Did you look up things on the internet when you got stuck?
I think I broke down and had to use a guide once or twice. That was less me feeling completely lost and more just me realizing I was still doing undergrad at the time and I was working multiple jobs. So I was a lot more likely to just look up help when I got stuck because I didn't have hours on end to just try to explore and work it out for myself.
Right.
It was a time constraint thing.
That makes perfect sense. I was lucky when I first played the game. I would have been about 5, so that was back in 1998, which was also about the same time I was playing Final Fantasy VII.
Now, did you say you had an older sibling or that you were the oldest?
Older sibling. I have a 35-year-old brother, and we have a 12-year age gap.
Okay.
So he had played that game through and through. He was the one who originally pioneered it. He bought the guidebook because he got stuck too, and back then you couldn't just look it up on the internet. So he plowed through that, and then I learned just by watching him. And then as he got older and he would have to go off and do his own stuff, work, go to school, what have you, I would chill at home and play this game. And with the infinite amount of time I had as a child, and the ability to like go at things and not stop, I found as much as I possibly could in that game without any help. And it was a lot of fun. It was like a really thrilling experience to sit down and be immersed in a world so alien with no explanation of what's going on whatsoever and eke it out and get to that ending and get the satisfaction of doing it alone. It was fun. And the ambiance and the game, the atmosphere, the music, everything was so well tailored that no other game on the Super Nintendo did it for me at the time. I mean, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past was so good, but it was a lot more happy and lively. I, when I was younger, I'd never gotten further enough in that game to find the dark points, the plot, what have you. So that didn't matter to me as a kid. I didn't care about dialogue. I didn't care about the story. I'm fine.
Right.
But Super Metroid didn't have a story. It didn't have dialogue. So you're just immersed in a world of action trying to figure out what to do next. And it was really excellent. It was just excellent for me.
I started to get that a little bit with Metroid Fusion, because I played Fusion, I want to say 12 when I picked up Fusion.
Yep, and it was a little bit more story-driven, like you were saying, but there was still a lot of what am I going to do next in that game.
Yeah, there was a lot of that, and I had never played Super Metroid, but Super Metroid was all over it. Like, your main antagonist in Fusion was the SAX, who is an alien who has all of Samus's abilities from the previous game. And so it almost gave Super Metroid almost this mythical quality, because I'd heard of it, and like friends had older brothers who had played it, and I would read Nintendo Power, and Nintendo Power would make references to it, and it was always held in this really high reverence. And so me coming in at Fusion, it was like me trying to go up against this legend that I had heard of, but I had never actually experienced.
That's a good way of putting it. The legend is you from the former game, which ties in the plot even more fluidly when you think about it. And not to mention that fear factor that's in Fusion, I haven't seen in any of the other Metroid games, except for maybe Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. But Fusion did have that creepy quality where the Samus SAX had the eyes that you couldn't see and had that ghostly figure behind the visor. And that giant cat-like cement thing that flies at you as a boss battle and you smash its face off and it's got the gooey cat face that gets worse and worse as you keep attacking it. Just
the nightmare like gravity creature? Yeah, that thing was messed up.
Yes, it was. And then like there was a water creature down there too that was hyper fast.
Yeah, it was this
when
giant.
When you first run into it, that music that plays is just so like jarring and fast and action packed that that game did have jump scares and just little tidbits like that. And on a handheld game to have that was priceless. That was really ahead of its time, in my opinion.
Right, now I did some looking into some of the background of this. I know the team who did Fusion is the same team who did Super Metroid.
That's right.
And they wanted to, and they'd always been really good at doing a lot with a little as far as story was concerned. So they wanted to try and take the narratives that they had established with Super Metroid, and they kind of wanted to take that into a different direction. There's a really excellent video essay, I'll see if I can link you to it later, called Corrupting a Classic, where it talks about all the ways that Fusion kind of contorted the formula that Super Metroid had perfected.
Which, when you think about it, isn't that the way you get a lot of excellent things anymore? When I listen to music, for instance, when I hear an artist do the same thing over and over and over, I get a little bit bored of listening to that artist. Like Boston. I love Boston. Their first album's phenomenal. But as they kept going, I was less and less interested and less enthusiastic about their works. But with Metroid, the original game was good. Super Metroid championed on top of that. Metroid 2 was in the middle, but it was a little less intuitive because it was a Game Boy game. However, it still did a lot of excellent things. The spider ball, for instance, rolling around on the walls was an excellent feature. That wasn't in Super Metroid. You didn't have that. But you had a spring ball where you could jump up and down in Super Metroid. But the games keep on developing and changing over time, and that's part of what I like about Nintendo's R&D 1. They're always looking to push that boundary with Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion and Metroid Prime and all these things.
Well, getting back to Metroid 2, because it is kind of the black sheep of the family, and I can see why. Metroid 2, I also picked that up. I think I was like a senior in high school, or like a freshman in college. I picked that up. I found it for $5 at a GameStop, and I was super excited to get it home, and I got it running. I probably played it for like an hour before I realized like the controls are really clunky. There's not really much of a map. I don't know where I'm going, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but everything's the same, like gray background.
A little bit different with that one because you've got such a how do I put this, such a small frame of reference on Metroid 2 because when you're playing the original Metroid, large screen, large area, you're able to see what's coming. Metroid 2 didn't do that as well because it was a little bit more zoomed in and a little bit more honed on that one thing of Samus trying to traverse the map, and it didn't have a lot of room to it.
No, it didn't. And I feel like Metroid 2 was way too ambitious for what the hardware could attain. To give you an example, I got the Spider Ball. And about a minute after I got the Spider Ball, my reaction was not, oh, hey, cool, there's this thing to explore. It's, oh, crap, I can ride on everything. Now I have to ride over every surface, and this is going to get tedious as hell really fast.
Yeah, instead of having a tool that makes things easier, it's a tool that makes it more difficult later on down the line, and not in a fun, like, I champion this way, more of a, oh, I have to do this now, sort of way.
Right, it was adding more check marks I had to put off whenever I entered a new area. Now, what did the Spider Ball really interesting was the Prime series was that the Spider Ball only works on sort of preset tracks. And
Yes.
what happened was you would have to A, find the tracks, and a lot of time they were hidden, and B, they're usually integrated into other puzzles you'd have to do, like some sort of platforming by maneuvering from track to track.
Yep.
Sometimes there's about timing. So there's
Yep.
a lot more involved in that. I think Prime is when Spider Ball really got nailed down and lived up to its potential. And it's because they limited it to these smaller sections. Because
Yes,
can you
and then
imagine?
on top of that, you had the 3D element to it as well that made it even more exciting.
Yeah, because if you could climb over literally everything in a 3D space, you'd never finish the game.
Nope, not at all. And I mean, they even played in the boss battles and such where you have to go along the wall and then put a bomb in this one specific area to be able to harm the boss.
I think that was the giant praying mantis boss. Like, what was her name? She was the like one of the first bosses you fought.
I don't know because I don't know the lore of that one as well.
Metroid Flower boss.
Yes, that was one of the first ones, but you don't need to use the spider ball to kill it. It's just something you get later on. You just need the morph ball to get to that and kill it. But the spider ball did play a lot of like puzzles. It played a big part in those, and it played a big part in finding secrets. Like you said, they'd be well hidden, and then you get a piece of the Chozo from it.
Yeah, I loved Prime. Prime was a really great fresh start to the series. Retro Studios, which was a third party company they had brought in to do it. They managed. It was crazy that they came in and they wanted to do it 3D, and for a while they actually like an over the shoulder, and they wound up thinking that was less immersive. And then just finding all the ways to make something that's 2D and make it have it make that jump. It worked really well. They managed to make it work for Mario 64. They managed to make it work for Ocarina of Time. But now seeing if something like Metroid could make the jump, and they kept the series, the sense of exploration. They kept this very isolated feeling, this idea of being very alone, of being in this very wild and unknown place, and wanting to just explore every nook and cranny, and that sense of progression and strength building. All of that was there, and they did a phenomenal job of getting back to basics with entirely new mechanics.
I agree with you completely. They didn't scrap any of the old theories, and they even managed to make Screw Attack work. I don't know if it was in the first Prime, but I know it was in Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. They still managed to make that work even in the 3D environment, which I really liked. And they also added all those great text boxes that you could scan everything and figure out what it was and learn a little bit more about it if you wanted to.
Well, I know the scanning, that was interesting because they were trying to work that in. And a big part of that came along when Miyamoto was kind of overseeing the project because he is some kind of magical ferryman who just kind of flits from project to project around Nintendo. Because that's just what he does. And at one point, they were at a meeting, and he said, well, what if she had a bug's head? And he left it at that, and he just left the development team to wonder on it, and eventually they came down to, oh, what if she could, like, see different ways, like, through the different like see from the different perspective, like the compound eyes, and adjust how she saw things. That got integrated into the scan visor.
Wow. To take something like she's got a bug head and then make that is really intuitive and creative.
It is. They did some really interesting stuff. I know a big issue for them was the morph ball because they couldn't figure out how to make the morph ball work from because you're already in a 3D like first person perspective. They couldn't figure out how to make that jump from 3D or from first person to third person perspective, and it took them a few months to get it to really work seamlessly. And they were told that if they can't make the morph ball work, Metroid doesn't work, and they'd scrap the entire game if they couldn't figure out the morph ball.
It is a critical part of the game. I mean, you look back at the old games, original Metroid, Super Metroid, and then Spider Ball and Metroid 2. It's so necessary. It is the first thing that you get.
What's really funny about the morph balls I found out later on is that the morph ball only exists was because they couldn't find a way to like graphically make Samus crouch down and crawl through things. Because that was originally the idea, was she would just like get down and she would like soldier crawl through these smaller openings, and they couldn't figure out a way to depict that properly. So they said, just fuck it. She turns into a ball. She just rolls around because that's easier to animate.
I like that. That's really cool.
It's I love when I dig behind the scenes and how things that are integral to something like lore or the building block of a franchise just came from some creators going, fuck it.
Yep. And next thing you know, you've got this fantastic like just thing, and it just keeps on going and keeps on going. And like I know that there's some situations in Zelda that happened. I don't know them off the top of my head though.
Well, I know in Zelda, part of the one of my favorite things from Ocarina of Time was that they were originally going to make him look cartoony, like he looked in the artwork for like A Link to the Past. So he was going to be a little more squatter. He was going to have this more cartoony face. And then I think it was one of their wives. I'm not sure if it was Miyamoto's wife or Aonuma's wife. Said, I don't know, he looks ugly. I want him to be pretty, and so that's when we got like the very like Legolas look we wound up with. But then they decided we can't have him looking too pretty. We can't have him trying too hard to be cool and pretty, so we have to make him still look kind of dorky. So he's going to keep the dorky green Peter Pan hat. We're going to give him white tights and big clunky boots because he can't look too cool.
Very nice. Well, there you go, and that's the original outfit.
Yeah, but anyway, getting back to Metroid, because if we go to Zelda, we'll be all here all night because I'm a walking Zelda encyclopedia.
Well, I can talk about Metroid all day.
Yeah, so let's keep it focused on Metroid. And now getting back to 2, the most recent game I finished was the fan remake of Metroid 2 called AM2R, Another Metroid 2 Remake. And this was basically one guy and a handful of others spent the better part of a decade building this game based on the Fusion engine. And I've got to say, having played through part of 2 on the color and having to walk away from it and then picking this up, oh my god, it's phenomenal. It feels and plays a lot like Metroid Zero Mission. Because Metroid Zero Mission was absolutely amazing.
It was one of my favorite games. I liked it even more than Fusion.
Yeah, Fusion was great. And actually, Zero Mission, I played the first Metroid, or once again, part of it, because if you had Prime, and you had Fusion, and you hooked them up with your Game Boy Advance link cable, you could play the original NES Metroid. It was built into the Prime disc.
Yep, I remember that as well.
And as an Easter egg, and I got a way to do it, and I played it for a few hours, and that was another thing where it was super ambitious, and I'm sure it would have been amazing to me if I had played it back when it had just come out, but trying to play it after Fusion, it was really clunky, and it didn't quite work as well. And so when Metroid Zero Mission came out, I was super stoked, and I picked that up, first chance I got, and I felt like, yes, this is what this experience should be.
Yes, and they extended on it and made it incredible. You had the ledge hanging, which I was talking about earlier, made traversing the maps even easier and more fluid. And on top of that, they added that extra bit at the end there where you play as Samus Zero Suit, and you have to go through the space pirate ship and get your suit back to defeat Mecha Ridley, which was just so cool from a nerdy perspective of enjoying the lore in Super Metroid and seeing a mechanical version of Ridley was excellent, and trying to sneak through these little corridors where things are dimly lit. So cool to do that. It was so much fun.
It
And to do
felt
that in my hands instead of on like screen was also incredible.
it felt like almost like it switched genres from this exploration to almost like a survival horror.
All of a sudden you're playing Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, because because for those of you who don't know, at the end of Metroid Zero Mission, which is a remake of the original Metroid, you beat the big boss, you fly away in your spaceship, and you think it's over, but then they animate a cutscene, and the space pirates shoot you down, and you crash, your suit's destroyed, and all you have essentially is a leotard. You're in basically your long underwear that you're wearing under the suit, and you have a little pistol, which even at a full charge can't do anything more than stun an enemy for a few seconds. So you have to navigate. You have to navigate these ruins that you crashed into to try and find some way out, and eventually you find a better version of your suit, and you get to just go through, and all the space pirates who are running from a few minutes ago, you can now absolutely just destroy.
That's right. And part of the space pirate, I believe it was either a ship or a colony or something, was built into those ruins as they were excavating them.
Mm-hmm.
So you see these points that are very technical and very advanced, all of a sudden decay into these old ruinous parts as well. So you'll be going through like cement, not even cement, but old stone corridors with all these runic symbols. All of a sudden you're hitting a security camera and an alert is going off, and all these space pirates in the area are suddenly flocking toward you, and you have to hide in some sort of crevice in the dark and hope that they don't see you, otherwise you're dead.
Yeah, I love that section, and it means even more in the context of just how much the Alien franchise influenced the Metroid franchise. And it gets this idea of you're being hunted, and you're not this overpowered badass. You are very limited, and you have to outwit this thing that's coming after you.
That's right. And then on top of that, I mean, to play off of that a little bit, looking back at Super Metroid, when we talk about H.R. Geiger or Giger, I don't know how
I
to
think
say
it's
his
Guy. I
name
want to say
correctly.
Geiger. I'm going to say Geiger.
I want to say Geiger as well. But when you look at the ruins and his artwork and how the artwork plays in the Super Metroid's artwork, it's jarring how similar it is in a way. Like some of the backdrop areas of walls will have these forms and figures that look very much like H.R. Geiger's work. It's really cool, very immersive. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the connections go even deeper because I know part of the reason they made Samus a woman was based on Sigourney Weaver's character from Alien.
That's right. And oh man,
And they
Aliens. I just watched that movie for the first time in a while the other night. I forgot how incredible that movie is.
right, and then there's some themes of motherhood and parentage that they integrate into Super Metroid, which also play into part of the undertones in the Aliens franchise.
That's right. So for those who don't know, in Super Metroid, the game starts off with a scrolling text talking about the original Metroid game from Samus's perspective. She's explaining how she went to this space colony planet, Planet Zebes, and destroyed Mother Brain, where the Metroids were thought to have been eradicated because that was her job, to destroy all the Metroids on the planet and then kill Mother Brain. So she flies away and then picks it up back in Metroid 2, where she goes to this planet called SR388 and has to kill all the Metroids there as well. There's more advanced ones, and she works her way through killing all those. And at the end of the game, as she's walking away, a little larva hatches, and a little baby Metroid starts floating around her and treats her like its mother. So she takes this little baby Metroid back to the scientists, where they research it and find out that the powers of the Metroid can be harnessed for the good of everybody and create power or perhaps regenerate cells. I don't know at this time. And as she's flying away from that ship that she drops it off at, she gets a distress signal and goes back. And Ridley, one of the main villains from the original game, this giant dragon, and is also part of the space, I forget the name of them,
Space Pirates.
Yeah,
yes. Fun little Easter egg.
Pirates.
Ridley's name comes from the Aliens director Ridley Scott.
That's right. And then this dragon steals the Metroid from the space station where all the scientists were, and then takes it back to the planet from the original game. So Metroid is all Super Metroid is based on the original map of Metroid in a way. So you go back to this planet to hunt down everything, and you start seeing these areas that you've been to in the original game, but drastically better looking, and everything's more advanced, and the game immerses you in that, but expands on it, makes the map much larger, much more in depth.
I do love, if you look at the Metroid games from 1 to Fusion, there's a very coherent story. And looking at it now, it's almost surprising because with franchises running so long, there's a lot of like prequels, remakes, there's a bunch of like pseudo sequels, a bunch of side stories. And most franchises now have really this very convoluted storytelling. But if you look at these all the 2D Metroid games, and you line them up end to end, they make one very cohesive story. And it's weird that that's considered something that we just don't see anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, you see that well in Drake's Uncharted. That's a very good game for seeing a series develop and seeing a story go. And another great example is Halo. Halo 1 to Halo 6, even. Like, 6 hasn't come out. Halo 5. Very good plot. Very understandable. And there were some offshoots here and there. And Metroid did that too. They had their offshoots with Zero Mission, and then they started doing Prime. Prime doesn't necessarily fit into the timeline as well as all the other games. However, you do see that in some modern games, but not as often.
The Prime trilogy is supposed to fit into the timeline between the Metroids 1 and 2 chronologically.
Oh, is that how that worked out? Okay.
That was how it was supposed to work. Now, if you do pick up the Metroid series, I would recommend play the remakes of the 2D. Always go with remakes for the 2D. If the only real reasons to go back to the original Metroid 2 is just like exploration to see just kind of get an idea of what that was at the time, basically just for the novelty. If you want the real hardcore experience, go pick up Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance, then fire up your laptop and go download AM2R. I know Nintendo took it down officially, but once something's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. So you shouldn't have too much of a hard time tracking it down. And I'm not super hardcore with running emulators. I'm not great with it. It took me about 10 to 15 minutes to find AM2R, download it, and then get it running on my laptop with a controller.
That's a pretty good amount of time. And from my aspect, I would say, as a fan and as somebody who's played all the Metroid games, you don't necessarily need to play any specific order. I would jump in at Super Metroid because you can jump in the original game. There are no remakes or anything for this yet. You can get them on virtual consoles for the Wii. You can get them on the Switch, what have you. And it holds up so well because they spent so much time engineering and creating the game that fans still now perfect the game by doing what they call speedrunning. And that's a totally different conversation. But I'll get into that a little bit more later.
Metroid Zero Mission is on the Wii U Virtual Console right now.
Oh, how much does it run?
Let me double check that. I'm opening the page now, but I will say I would actually recommend working right up to Super Metroid because it does feel like the pinnacle of the 2D games, and so I worry that if you start with Super Metroid, there might be nowhere to go but down. They're all They're all incredibly solid, phenomenal games. But if you're starting with something that's considered in some circles one of the best games ever made and very much a very seminal game, it might seem a bit strange going back. So I would recommend starting with Zero Mission. If you have a Wii U, it's like $8, or if you can track down a physical copy, it's out for the GBA. So start with Zero Mission, download Metroid, go download AM2R, play through that, then do Super Metroid, and then finish off with Fusion. Because, like I said, it is that very cohesive story, and so if you are just jumping in, I feel like you're doing yourself a service by being able to just follow that from end to end. Because you don't get to do that very often in anything anymore.
I can see that. But I don't mean to undermine you, but there isn't much of a story in Super Metroid. It explains a little bit at the beginning. It gives you a good intro, tells you what already happened, and then as you play the game, there is no story happening. You make the story as you go along by playing it. So you don't necessarily need to know that and immerse yourself in it unless that is what you want to do. If you want the story and you want the narrative, play it the way that you just described it. But if you just want to play a game casually that is exploratory and lone wolf fun, I would recommend picking up Super Metroid because that has all those aspects and is so well engineered that you can play it over and over and learn new tricks and things in the game that just no other Metroid game has. And I'd love to go off a little bit on those if you give me about 5 minutes to talk about them.
I will say I agree. I do agree with you. I feel like we're kind of on the same page in that if you want to play if you want to get into the franchise, start with one. If you're only going to play one Metroid game, start with Super.
Yes, I'm 100% back that up because a lot of people don't have the time to get into a whole franchise anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But Super Metroid did this excellent thing where they had a game. They had a finished version of the game. And instead of just releasing it as was, they took a couple of months out of hanging out at the office and putting in all this overtime and making it even more fun. So as you play this game, you pick up power-ups. Power-ups give you extra things like missiles, super missiles, give you different beams to shoot because Samus has a gun on her arm. And, for instance, you can get a beam that shoots through walls. You can get a beam that freezes enemies. You can get a beam that destroys them super quickly. But they're hidden all over this map that is so hard to traverse because you need certain things to get to certain areas. But if you play the game enough, and you get good enough at it, you can learn all these little tricks that are inserted purposely so that you can get to different areas without needing the items to get there. For instance, there's this thing called mockballing. In the game, you can sprint, and as you're sprinting, you move at a faster rate than you would if you were walking. Now, in Morph Ball, which you use to get under certain objects, you can't go at sprint speeds. You can only go at the regular Morph Ball speed. But if you sprint and then jump in midair and crouch, and then as soon as you hit the ground, turn into a Morph Ball while holding the sprint button, you'll go as fast in the Morph Ball form as you would while sprinting. And there are these gates in the game that drop. They're timed drops. You can get under those gates with the Mock Ball and get certain things ahead of time and skip bosses even. And that's just one example. You can get the wave beam early and completely negate gates that you have to have come from the other side to open. For instance, you would have to shoot a gate from one side to be able to open it, but with the wave beam you can shoot it from both sides because you can shoot through walls now. So you can exploit these talents and then play the game in a totally different fashion and beat it faster. And that's what speedrunners do. Speedrunners play this game over and over until they perfect the in-game time speed, because the game does time you on your entire adventure. So it's, if you want to play it and get into it and just go right from the beginning and have no holds barred, enjoy yourself, you can do that. It'll take a lot longer, but you can get immersed and enjoy it. If you find you've played it a few times and you just want to really get into the nitty-gritty of it because you like it that much, then you can learn all these tricks and speedrun it too.
And there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of versatility. Super Metroid is one of the most well-engineered games I've ever seen. Yeah, just go play Super. If you ever have the chance, just go play Super Metroid. If you have, I think it's available on Virtual Console for the new 3DS. The emulator doesn't quite work. If you have a regular 3DS, it won't work because it doesn't have quite enough horsepower to run the Super Nintendo emulator.
That's true. I agree there. I've tried running my Super Nintendo emulator on my laptop, which it works well on there, but I've tried running it on a phone. It doesn't work for crap on a phone.
Well, I know.
I've tried running it on a console too, and it hasn't worked on consoles as well.
Well, I know. I don't know a ton about emulation. What I do know is that there's something like a port, where in that a game is basically it's the same game, and they rebuild it they just retool the input for a different console. Something like when they ported Link to the Past from the Super Nintendo to the Game Boy Advance. because the Game Boy Advance could run that hardware when it was, I believe the term is when it's running natively. But emulation isn't down a port, because emulation is you take the original code and you have to trick it into thinking it's running on the original system. So not only are you running the game itself, but you're creating an entire mock version of the console you're running it on. So running a Super Metroid game on an emulator means that your whatever device you're using it on also has to essentially create a virtual Super Nintendo.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
And so that's going to eat up a lot more processing power than just running the game. So that's why it seems like something like a 16-bit game should be able to run really easily on anything we have modern. But if we don't have something with that much raw horsepower, it's going to stumble a little bit because it actually takes more computing power to run the emulator software than it does to actually run the game itself.
Which makes sense. I could see that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. If anyone is actually listening, feel free to correct me in the comments if I got this technical stuff wrong, because if I do mess up, I do like to be corrected.
Yeah, we're paraphrasing here, but I'm not paraphrasing about Super Metroid. I've played that game far too much.
Now, I will say we talked about how amazing the 2D games are. We've touched a little bit on how awesome the 3D games are. I feel like a retrospective would not be complete if we did not talk about the black sheep of the family, which is Metroid Other M.
See, I can't talk that much about that game because I've never played it. I've heard all the negative reviews about it, and I never had a Wii, so I had no opportunity to play the game. But if you've played it, you'll be able to tell me a little bit about it.
I have played it to completion.
Okay. And how was it, in your opinion?
It was incredibly frustrating, because that was frustrating for me because I very rarely will make day one purchases, because I usually like to hang out and wait till something goes on sale used. But because it's a Metroid game, and to give you an idea of my video game habits, Zelda, of course, is like the absolute highest echelon. That's my favorite franchise. But then the number 2 slot is pretty hotly contested between Metroid and Fire Emblem. And essentially,
Fire Emblem is a great series.
Yeah, maybe we can do a Fire Emblem episode sometime. But I love the Metroid games. I'm always sure to pick them up. I was super excited because there hadn't been a new game since Prime 3. They were giving it over to a new team, and they're gonna mix up the styles because there's gonna be a combination of essentially the 3D exploration with 2D combat, or 2D's exploration with 3D combat. And I was interested to see how that worked. And I got the game. I paid I bought it day one, pre-ordered it, full price, and it was not good.
It's a shame, because from what I understand, they gave that game over to Team Ninja, and Team Ninja is responsible for one of my favorite games. It's Ninja Gaiden. On the Xboxes and stuff, the Ninja Gaiden's 3Ds were so fun and so difficult that I expected the new Metroid to be good.
I think it was a bad fit, because now that I've played more Metroid, I kind of understand it a little bit better. Metroid is all about this. It's about story through the environment without necessarily having to things being explained to you. It's about this isolation, and it's about careful pacing. And then Team Ninja, it's about going hella over the top and all this crazy narrative stuff. And they're not necessarily a bad team, but I would say they're probably a bad fit for this franchise. What they did is they made it very story driven. Lots of fully animated cutscenes, which not necessarily bad in and of itself, but they made Samus as a character pretty much completely unlikable. The voice actress they got for her was, I don't know if this was her performance or if it was her direction, but it felt like they had just kind of grabbed someone from the office and just had them read off a script.
That's a shame, because Samus, having the first major voice acting for Samus, from what I understand, that's just a shame.
And then a lot of it was she joined up with the military, and then she had a lot of daddy issues with her commanding officer. And then the way they locked up the power-ups in this game, because it's a Metroid game, you have to progress with your power-ups in this very organic way, as opposed to something like an RPG where you progress through experience points and your numbers going up. You get stronger in Metroid by organically finding new ways to explore your environment and then getting those items becoming stronger. And in this one, I can see on paper how this would work. And the idea is that she has all of her power-ups from Super Metroid. But in the more enclosed environment of the space station, they were the higher-ups from the space military who are there are telling her not to use them for fear of damaging the ship.
That is the absolute lamest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it feels more organic because the Prime games especially did this, where they have to kind of reset Samus after every game for the structure of the game to work.
I do remember there was this video series I used to watch called The Decline of Video Gaming.
Oh my god, I love the decline of video games.
I do too.
Oh my god, on
But the one
Newgrounds?
section where they have Samus at the end of one of the Metroid games going, yes, I've conquered this, and I've got all my objectives, and I've got all my power-ups. On to the next mission, and then just trips, and all the power-ups fall into this grate in the ground, and then go down to the sewer, and she's just so dismayed.
That's kind of how it rolls, so I appreciate that they are trying to find a more narrative way to restrict the power system. And in a way, this could have been a really cool setup in seeing her kind of clash with her higher ups. And sending her clashing with her higher ups and how she interacts with her former commanding officer being in charge of the mission. So there's a lot of potential there, and they just squander the ever living hell out of it because it comes down to I can't use power ups because Daddy said no, and
That's terrible. You can't have that in the Metroid game. But I've seen it done so much better. Look at Metroid Fusion. They explain not having the power ups anymore because an alien took over her power suit, and all of a sudden it's walking around with all her powers, and she has this different suit that she doesn't know how to use yet. That makes perfect sense.
right. And in this one, I kind of understand why, let's say, the Federation would try to lock your super missiles and your power bombs and your wave beams because that could fuck shit up. But you get to a point of this space station supposed to mimic environments for these creatures, and one of them's a lava area. And if you played any amount of Metroid, you know you've got the Varia suit, which is supposed to keep you safe. But your Varia suit, your base, something with no offensive abilities, purely defensive, is shut off because once again, Daddy didn't say you could use it yet.
A defensive ability is turned off. Ability that prevents you from getting burned is turned off. That's like somebody telling me, hey, you're in this dangerous environment. Don't you dare wear that wetsuit. Because you're going into the ocean, but you can't wear that wetsuit until I tell you you can. What the hell?
That's exactly what it was. And it could have been so much cooler if, say, they had kind of put Samus on the honor system about using her powers, but then if she broke that, maybe they built some kind of backdoor into her suit and they would manually shut off your powers for you, so you have to do a section without some of the abilities that you acquired so far, kind of like the end of Zero mission. And then like even developing it with your relationship with Adam more, so like Adam disobeying his higher ups and then reactivating your abilities. There's so much they could have done with it, and they did absolutely nothing with it.
That's such a shame, and it makes me happy that I haven't even played the game.
We'll hate play it sometime. You can come over to my place, we'll just hate play it.
Okay, that sounds good, because I've never had the opportunity to. I would certainly give it a shot.
Oh, there's also a subplot about how one of the Space Marines who's come to help you out, how they've turned evil and they are secretly trying to murder everyone, and by the end of the game they just forgot who it was. Like, they just forgot to finish the subplot. They never
Really?
actually end. Yeah, they just forgot to finish the subplot. I'm guessing it was
You're
the
sure
evil
there's
guy
no
with the curly
unlock or
mustache.
anything for it?
I'm guessing it was the evil guy with the mustache. Probably him. Although, like, another really egregious part, though, I just remembered, was so it takes place chronologically, a pretty well established way into the franchise. So it'd be after Super Metroid. So even discounting the Prime games, it'd be the fourth game chronologically.
Okay.
And you've encountered Ridley in every one of those games. And Ridley, we find out, actually has some specific significance because I think it was in a tie-in manga that Nintendo did. We found out that Ridley is actually the one responsible for killing Samus's parents and making her an orphan and wiping out her entire space colony to begin with. And that's how she falls in with these aliens called the Chozo, and they give her a power suit, and that's what gives her this advantage when fighting all of these alien Metroids. And so there's a bit where you do find Ridley in the game, and it's instead of just taking him head on, Samus sees him and then immediately locks up out of terror, out of seeing Ridley again. And she has to wait for one of the other guys from the military outfit to come in and save her.
Wow. Well, that's kind of an interesting little area. That's a lot more evocative than anything else that it sounds like they've done in the game.
Now, if this had been the first time she had encountered Ridley after seeing him kill her parents, that would have been one thing. But the fact that they purposely put this game after Super Metroid, where she's already fought him 3 times now, or do you find him in Metroid 2? No, you don't find him in Metroid. So you've already
You do
fought him
not.
twice now. And then trying to sneak that in there, it seems like bullshit that she would feel like that she would lock
Yeah,
up.
it does. I agree with you there. I mean, I props to them for trying to do something with it, but that sounds like they've just done it completely wrong.
Yeah, and it's really hard to get too much into the themes of Metroid without touching on gender politics at all.
That's true, because there are a lot of groundbreaking ideas that Super Metroid and Metroid and all those games have done.
I know back in the 80s, or it came out in what, like mid 80s? Metroid, the original Metroid came out, I want to say late 80s, mid 80s?
Yeah, that sounds about right to me.
Right, at that point, lady game characters just weren't a thing. Everything was male by default, and you just assumed that the character you were controlling was a boy, and they even referred to Samus as a he in the manual to kind of save the surprise. I will say, in retrospect, it seems a little regressive that the reveal is cool, but the fact that the more power ups you collect, the more clothes she takes off, seems a little bit counter counter progressive.
Yeah, I agree with that there. Whereas in games like Super Metroid, the more power ups you get, the bulkier and more powerful you get.
I'm talking the end credit scene. So like after you've completed the game, you watch the credits, and based on how many power ups you've had, like if you're awful, she'll just stay in her suit. If you
It's
do
actually, I can tell you that it's not based on power ups, it's based on time of completion.
okay,
Fun fact. But yes, it does do that. If you beat the game, especially Super Metroid, if you beat it in a certain amount of time, like let's say under an hour, you see Samus without any of her clothes, well, any of her suit on. She has clothes. I think that might be a little too risque for old Nintendo.
it's a
But
bikini essentially, right?
yes, it was a bikini and pants. Mm-hmm. And then when you beat Metroid Fusion, I remember there being some sexualization of her with the armor off as well in the blue suit, which you obviously have at the end of the game Zero Mission, that you're powerless and you're trying to get through this base. But you see close up pictures of that. And as we know, Samus is one of the most sexualized fictional characters of all time, too, in just video game general.
Yeah, I'm looking at the sprites for the perfect completion. In the original Metroid, it is just basically it's a pink one piece swimsuit with sleeves and boots. If you beat Super Metroid with the best completion, it is a crop top and panties. Super Metroid, it is what looks like a bikini top, but with a neck, and then that's kind of connected to a pair of panties. And then Super Metroid is some super short, or Metroid Fusion is short shorts and then a tight top with a collar. So as cool as it is that they kind of managed to Trojan horse this badass woman into video games and kind of make her essentially the first lady of video games, it for as awesome as that is, it seems a little bit odd that they would make it so that the better you perform, the more clothes she takes off.
Yes, that is not necessarily the type of thing we want to be showing our children.
Less. Oh, think of the children. What will become of them if they see a pixelated lady, and more. It's still taking this character that we're spending all this time with, and then by the end basically reducing her down to just her body at the end of it.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because you've played this entire game, done all these incredible things, and that's what you get.
It is really unfortunate that they would do that.
But luckily, the way the games are and how they're laid out, and just the incredible like storytelling through gameplay, make up for that a little bit. Yeah, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that the games are still good, even if you are against that type of just sexualization. It is an excellent game, and you don't see much of that during the game. That only happens at the end. For instance, if you die in Super Metroid, all you see is her power suit bursting off and she dies. And there's nothing sexualized about that. That's just what happens.
They
However, to build up to the end of the game and have that happen is disappointing, but it doesn't make the game any less good.
Absolutely, because like you can love a thing and still admit that a thing has some flaws, and these aren't even necessarily these may not have been flaws with how it was built at the time, but now with some retrospect, you can see how they were problematic.
Yes, of course, and it's not to say that Metroid games are the best games ever. They're not necessarily. I think that for the genre and the time period, Metroid was a pioneer and certainly one of the best games in the entire spectrum. But you also have other things like Metal Gear Solid, which advanced way more and has a lot more opportunity now than it did back then. Metroid, and I always put these two together, Metroid and Metal Gear Solid, because Metal Gear Solid you're sneaking around an unknown area and trying to figure out a plot, and it's explained more through gameplay. The old ones, anyhow. And Metroid is a lot like that, but they splinter off and go in totally different directions, and Metroid doesn't hold up as well, in my opinion, as Metal Gear Solid does currently with the current games. But as far as nostalgia goes, I think Metroid kind of takes the cake for me.
Yeah, I know the Metroid franchise has gone largely quiet the last few years. I know we got Metroid Prime Federation Force, and that upset a lot of fans because I think they interpreted that as instead of giving us the real Metroid game we wanted, they gave us this weird, clunky co-op game. I have not played it. I have not picked up this game yet because I don't have 3 friends with DSs who'd want to play it.
I haven't played it either. The last game that I played that was a splinter off like that was Metroid Prime Hunters on the DS.
Which was you know what, I played that game so much. The L trigger is what you use to shoot. I played that game so much I broke my L trigger and I had to go out and get it. And I had to ask for a new DS for Christmas because I broke my L trigger. When I got a little older and I got a little bolder, I actually took my DS apart and I found a way to fix the L trigger. So now my DS has been restored and I'm super proud that I did that with my own 2 hands. I took it apart, I fixed the damage that was done to the sensor with the L pad, and then I put it all back together and it all still runs. And I'm super proud of myself that I got that running again.
Good job. That's a way better reason for doing it than what I've got for my PlayStation controller.
What are you doing on your PlayStation controller?
You repaired yours because you played it too much. I was playing PlayStation 4 on Battlefield 1, and I got very upset, and I smacked my controller against the ground, and the left trigger stopped working, and I went, oh no. So I had to pop it apart and look, and I haven't even completely fixed it. It's just a jerry-rigged version of what it once was to former glory.
I can dig that.
It still works, and for $60 a controller, I'm going to be damned if I don't make that thing work.
Yeah, I know. I never had a problem with hurling controllers. Like, even if I get frustrated, the worst I'm going to do is like grip it tighter. However, my younger brother had some serious anger problems, and so he had a habit of throwing controllers, smashing them on the ground. At one point, he actually managed to bust our GameCube because it was hooked up to the cord, and he threw a fit, and he tried to he was throwing a tantrum holding his controller, and he ripped it off the platform it was on while it was running, and it messed up the disc reader.
Oh no!
Yeah,
that's just unfortunate.
But as far as repairs go, my claim to fame, or not claim to fame, the pinnacle of my repairing prowess is I found a PSP that had been left on the side of the road. It was on a sidewalk, and it looked like it had been hit by a car. It had been hit by something. And I managed to take it home, take it apart, figure out what was wrong with it, order a few parts through eBay, and I got the whole thing running again.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's excellent.
Eventually, though, I got the whole thing running again, but I could not tell this at the time because it was off, but some of the screen was still busted. Like, it was busted beyond repair. Like, the whole thing ran, but the screen was cracked too much, and if I had ordered another screen, that would have been like an additional like $30. And at that point, if I had spent the money to buy a new screen, I could have bought a whole new PSP or a used PSP at that point. So I decided that it was time to just walk away from the project before it cost me more than I was getting out of it.
That's still a fun project, though.
Yeah, I'm super proud of myself, though. But I guess by the time we're drifting over to Sony, it means that we've pretty much covered everything we really need to for the Metroid franchise.
I agree. Super Metroid is my favorite game in the world. I'm just going to say that now because I gushed about it so much. So I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to get into solo action adventure games. And any of the Metroid franchise is pretty good to come in on except for Other M. I would not start out with that one. Or do start with that and sully your vision for Metroid right off the bat, and then go on to all the new games.
Yeah, just pretend Other M didn't happen. It's like what we do with the CDI Zeldas. We just pretend it didn't happen.
What happened?
What? No, the CDI didn't. The CDI wasn't the thing. It was vaporware.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
What? No.
Yeah, no. Virtual Boy, what's that?
Huh? No, like the first 3D they ever did was on 3DS. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sonic Underground? What? What?
I don't know. Oh my god.
Why
Speaking of 3D games, and one of the first ones, I'd love to talk about Star Fox sometime too.
Sure. Oh, anyway, one quick thing I wanted to say. I am going to try and kind of mitigate some of the hate for Federation Force, in that it probably did not take resources away from developing a new Metroid game. From what I've seen, Nintendo has a habit of if they see it in a new IP, they may or may not try to fold it into an existing one. Like Star Fox Dinosaur Planet was originally a completely standalone title. They like the anthropomorphic animals and try to fold it into the Star Fox timeline. My guess is they looked at what Federation Force was and thought, hey, we can make it aesthetically, we can add some Metroid trappings to it to try and get it to sell better. So chances are that Federation Force did not steal resources away from another proper Metroid. It was probably already in the works, and then they gave it a Metroid coat of paint to help it sell.
Probably.
Yeah. So there we go, Federation Force. I stuck my neck out for you.
You won't hear many people doing that.
I like to stick up for the underdog. It's how I roll. Except for Other M. Except for Other M.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel about the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, that's sports. You can't get me to talk about sports. I think I think that what's end the show is when you bring up sports. Like that's the show ender.
All right, everybody, we're done. That's it.
All right, catch you guys later.
My bad.
Bye.